Hello and welcome back to Eat Sleep Game. My name is Luke and this is episode 10 of our lovely little podcast here. I kind of feel like we should have a fun name for it rather than just repeating Eat Sleep Game, but maybe we'll come up with that at some point. I'm of course joined by Jake again. How are you doing today, Jake?
Yeah, not bad, man. Like I said, a little bit groggy. I had myself like a little 45-minute power nap before jumping on, and it's not always the best idea.
No, I always
A little
feel
bit of
terrible.
brain fog. Yeah,
I always feel horrible after a nap. Just don't bother anymore.
but we here.
Yeah, we are. We have got a fun episode today. As I mentioned last time, I have brought in my Game for All co-host. Well, he's the main host of Game for All, but I've hosted a couple of times. And he is also a developer over at Ubisoft. This is Jordan. How are you doing, Jordan?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to have this conversation. And basically be here to play devil's advocate, I guess, is what you've told me to do.
Absolutely. So Jordan is here to be developer. We're going to leave his dev hat on for the most part today, I think.
Yes, for sure.
And then Jake's here to be consumer side of stuff. But we'll get into that in a minute. Firstly, Jordan, obviously I just said you're a developer for Ubisoft and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously people may know us both from the Game for All podcast, but why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, what got you into gaming, what you like and stuff like that, just to let people that don't cross over between the two, let you know who you are.
Fair. So what got me into gaming? Probably from a very young age, I was always around video games because I've got two older brothers. So I always had access to video games, whether I was kind of watching or playing. And then the first game I remember playing was Ocarina of Time. I still think it's one of the greatest games ever made.
Yeah,
Jake's.
And it's, I don't know, I've just always been into games, and I got to the point where when I wasn't playing games, I was thinking about games, because obviously, especially as a disabled person, I've said this before on the Game for All show, is like, I couldn't run outside and play football or rugby or cricket, so I had to play video games, and it meant that I was spending probably 40 to 50 hours a week playing video games from the age of like 7 or 8.
Nice.
So
So just for a little bit of context as well, we know each other because we went to the same school.
Yes.
But we were very rarely in the same class. We had like crossover friends, because you'd be in class with some of my friends and vice versa, sort of thing.
Yeah, like we interacted,
never...
but we didn't interact enough to realise how much we had in common.
No, because obviously we got, we do Game for All, you're here now, and we've got the wrestling podcast together as well. And it is just, we've both said a number of times how weird it is how much we have in common, but because there was only brief interactions, it wasn't until way after leaving school and stuff like that we found out how much we had in common, sort of thing.
For sure.
The world works in weird ways, but gaming's awesome. Let's have a quick chat about stuff we've been playing. So I'll go first. I've played a little bit of not Returnal. God, it's because I just read something about Returnal on my screen. That'd be dope. No, I've been playing Near Replicant. I've played about an hour or so far. I've got the recording ready to put up my first impressions. It's going to be like an hour or so, and I want to come up. I want to come up with some kind of name for it so I can brand it a bit, but I'll figure something out with that, I imagine.
Give it a lot of numbers.
yeah, I should. Do you know, so they actually did that as a joke. That
Really?
I think the director said that it was a joke because there's so many different versions of that game that they play on it and make a joke out of it for the remake, which is fun, which makes sense for those guys. They're a wacky bunch. But no, I'm like I said, I've only played about an hour or so, but I like it. It does feel very near. I think visually it's a bit outdated. It looks like Nier Automata, but it doesn't look as crisp to me. I think it does look last gen, but maybe like they've upped a bit of the...
So I haven't played it obviously yet, but I have seen a bit of the gameplay and stuff. And based on what I've seen, I would agree that visually it doesn't look quite as good as Nier Automata.
Yeah.
But I do think when you're remaking a game, you're still working from something that was very old, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So therefore, it can be done, but it's hard to always make remakes look as good as brand new games.
Yeah. Not everything could be like Resident Evil or Final Fantasy sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's weird though, because even though I'm noticing like some rough textures and stuff like that, I still think the game looks great. I still love the way it looks, because it does. I don't know. There's just this weird. It looks like Nier. I can't quite put my finger on it, but like I started roaming around this like open field.
It's got that certain art style, right?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of a little bit off.
I felt like it was
reality.
always like a little bit hazy, if you get what I
Yeah.
mean. Like,
Yeah.
just towards the edges of the screen, the color sort of like saturates a little bit, and it just creates a pretty cool effect.
Yeah. 100%. Like I say, it feels very Nier Automata. It just feels like it's in a different time period so far. It feels a little bit more medieval than it does futuristic and sci-fi, which I'm all for. I'm really interested to see how, because this is meant to, I think it's meant to lead into Automata somehow, but I don't know how. It's all very confusing.
And that's some
what I've
like
tried to read.
massive thousands and thousands of years gap in between.
So
Yeah.
the opening. So the opening 20 minutes or so, the little tutorial. Well, it's more than a little tutorial, but you're playing this kid and he's with his sister who's ill, and you're trying to do stuff. And then it cuts and it literally goes 1,400 and something years later, and I'm like, fuck, what? It just like completely jumps to a complete is bizarre.
Well, that doesn't sound like swear, does it?
Oh no, not at all.
Confusing.
But no, I'm really. It feels fine. I've had a couple of framey bits so far, like a couple of frame rate dips, and they're just really random. It's not while I'm in combat or anything like that. It was, I was just wandering around a little bit, and it just crapped itself.
Yeah, it's
but
a
it corrected
linear
itself.
game, isn't it? It's not open.
It's got open areas. Yeah, it's not so far. I don't know if it opens up a bit more afterwards.
In the same way a Final Fantasy game is, I imagine.
Yeah,
It's like
I think
this,
so.
this
Yeah.
illusion of openness that you got in the later games. Well,
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
they did go full open world in the end, but
Yeah. But yeah, no, so far so good. I should have that video up later. Well, I say later today. This is going out on Saturday, so Wednesday. It should already be up by the time you're listening to this, hopefully. Jake, what have you been playing anything recently?
no, not really. I mean, kind of. So I mean, I wanted to complete my Resident Evil run because I got to get to the Village release, and I've just locked it into my head that I actually do also need to complete 6, which is a very slow and painful experience because I really hate that game.
Yeah.
So I loaded it up, started Leon's campaign, which is the only half decent one out of the 3 of them, but it's just the further through it I was getting, the more this dread of, I've got to play the other characters soon. So it's just kind of slowed down to a bit of a grinding halt, really.
You should have done it the other way around and then rewarded yourself with the half decent playthrough.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I tried to do that, and it just, I mean, there's a character called Jake in it, and he's you would have thought, if he's going to have the same name as me, it's got to be a good campaign. But man, it's just absolute trash. So yeah, I mean, I tried to play through his campaign first because his was my least favourite of the 3. And yeah, I mean, I just didn't even wind up starting it. What's probably going to happen is I'll complete Leon's campaign and then go, yeah, that'll do. That's the gist of the entire story. I can move on now. But yeah, oddly enough, I actually loaded up Total War Warhammer 2 again.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that a couple of weeks ago.
Nice, good game.
Yeah, there was a new DLC. I don't know how long ago it came out. I don't keep up with it completely. I mean, I have all of the DLC, but I don't get it as soon as it drops, sort of thing.
Sure.
But I mean, yeah, I love the game to pieces. It is my most played Steam game. So
Nice.
But yeah, it's just highly addictive, and it's easy enough to just jump on for like a couple hours, do a bit of your campaign, and then drop it for the next month, and then come back to it. So
Sure. Fair. That sounds awesome. How about you, Jordan? You've been playing anything that you can talk about? Because obviously, you've probably got hands on things you can't say yet.
So I can tell you I've been playing, obviously, Luke, I'm a big fan of Game Pass. Everyone who watches the Game for All show or listens to the Game for All show will know that as well. I've been playing MLB The Show, because that dropped on Game Pass. If you want in-depth kind of thoughts on it, go over and check out our show, Game for All. But yeah, enjoying it. Cool. I feel like I'm getting good value out of Game Pass at the moment, because before that I was playing Outriders, obviously. And it's like, yeah, and right now I'm just kind of waiting for Village to drop. There is obviously a few things I'm playing I can't speak about. But other than that, I've jumped back into Yakuza Like a Dragon this week.
Oh, okay, nice.
Because I bought Judgment because the next gen upgrade came out for it. And I've never played Judgment. It's the only one in the series or connected to the series that I haven't played. But I wanted to finish some stuff off in Like a Dragon first.
Sure.
And going back to it, there's a business management mini game in Judgment, but it is almost framed like a side quest. You basically in Yakuza Like a Dragon, and you basically have to manage this business and get them to the #1 business in the share price rankings. And I ended up putting like 15 hours into just this mini game over 2 days.
Nice.
And it's because by doing the mini game, you actually get payouts, and it helps you to earn money and then buy stuff and upgrade your weapons and everything. Nice. And if you get to the #1 spot, you can get to the point where within like 5 minutes of playing this mini game, every 5 minutes you play this mini game, you'll make like 2 million. And some of the upgrades in the game to upgrade your weapons or upgrade the shop that upgrades your weapons and stuff like that, you'll need like 20 million. So one of the things I love about the Yakuza games, which I think doesn't actually get talked about in reviews and things like that, is they have loads of mini games, but every single one of these mini games achieves something in the game that affects the gameplay.
Okay, that's awesome.
So whether it be they upgrade your character traits, or they upgrade your relationships with other characters and give you different options for dialogue. Sometimes doing certain mini games can unlock other quests, which then unlock equipment that you wouldn't have otherwise. There's just a lot to it. Like, when I first stopped playing the game, I think my count was at around 30 hours.
Yeah.
And since I've started playing it again, I've already put nearly another 30 hours into it. And there's still probably 30 to 40 hours of content that I could do in the game as well.
Fair.
So yeah, I highly recommend it, to be honest. If you haven't played it, and if you're looking for a JRPG game that is slightly westernized in terms of how it tells its story, but it has the traditional JRPG mechanics, it's turn-based, and it does lean heavily into some JRPG stuff, I think you would really like this game.
Awesome. It sounds like you're going to get good value out of that if you've still got quite a lot to go. And segueing that, we're talking about value today. So our conversation today stems from the John Garvin and David Jaffe conversation, where the topic of paying full price for video games came up, because obviously Days Gone 2 has been... Well, it didn't get cancelled, it got rejected. Whether you agree with that or not is a different matter, because I'm not a huge hearing what the idea was, I'm not a huge fan of it personally, but that's beyond the point. So the crux of this is that John Garvin said the following. He said, if you love a game, buy it at full fucking price. I can't tell you how many times I've seen gamers say, yeah, I got that on sale, I got it through PS Plus or whatever. And then he goes on to say how they would complain about these games that are getting cheaper than normal wouldn't get a sequel, because they're not making enough money, or not making enough money in a certain amount of time, sort of thing. And that's really where the crux of like this whole conversation, outside of us as well, has been.
Yeah, because it's been a big industry conversation right now. We had a similar conversation over on our show, on our episode, our most recent episode. At the time that this one's going out, we talked about the true value of games, and I think there's a lot of conversation to be had over what is the actual value of games and what should you pay for games.
100%. And that's why I've assembled both of you here today. So as we know on here, Jake he uses a bit more derogatory terminology for it. I like to just say thrifty.
We'll go with thrifty today.
Well, I mean, you've said like cheapskate and stuff like that in the past. I'm like, it's a bit harsh, but stuff I'm fighting a bargain. But
at the end of the day, buying things within your means, there's no problem with that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And obviously Jordan's the developer side of stuff, so I want, as much as he feels comfortable doing so, I want his developer hat firmly on.
Yes.
And we're just going to come at this to two sides. So I'm going to moderate a bit because I'm somewhere in the middle. I will buy everything I can for cheaper if I can, but if I can't, I'll pay full price, whatever. But Jake, we'll go to you. How do you decide if you're going to pay full price for a game, or what would push you to either pay full price or decide to get it cheaper?
That's a pretty steep question to it, but I'll start off by saying I've got a really simple concept for what I would consider value for money with games.
Yeah.
If I spend £60 on a game, I expect to at least get 60 hours worth of gameplay out of it. Okay. Now that may be through the use of New Game Plus, but that's basically that's what I'm aiming to get out of the game. Like if I
so basically £1 an hour.
£1 an hour, yeah. And I don't really think that's too much to ask, because even games that don't last very long. So to mention some games I've paid full price for just off the bat without even thinking about it: Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, when they come out, whatever years they were, I bought them pre-release because I'm a sucker for the genre and for the IP of Resident Evil. I just love it. But with how short those campaigns are and how short you can make those campaigns be, each of them I've managed to rack up over 40 hours gameplay on. And that's even with the Resident Evil 3 remake being pretty trash as far as it goes comparatively to Resident Evil 2. But I've well got my money out of those games, and that's just through the addition of New Game Plus, attempting to get that S Plus rank. And obviously that's a very subjective thing, because that's my personal enjoyment of that game. But again,
that's definitely not something that everyone would do, right?
yeah, straight up. Like, I mean, how many people are gonna just reattempt a run? Because I'd stop a run midway through if I'd fucked up in a big way. So say I'd left something behind, I go, I fucked that up, it's time to start again. But then I'm looking at runs in a game that are only taking just around 2 hours time because I'm trying to get that S Plus rank. So it's not like the biggest loss in the world sort of thing. It's not like you've been playing Dark Souls 1 for the first time and you're like 60 hours in on your first run through, and then you start over. But I think that's pretty much how I gauge whether I think a game's been worth what I've paid for it. And it's always going to be subjective like that as to
100%.
whether I've enjoyed it.
You're definitely not alone in using that metric. That is something we see quite a lot of, and that's why like these big open world games have become what they are, as people expect a shitload of time spent in a game for how much they're putting down on it.
I do think. Sorry, Luke. I was just going to say.
Go for it. I was coming to you next.
I do think, I use a similar metric about time and kind of value for money, but it's not exactly the same.
Okay, how's yours?
So mine is, I obviously go to the cinema a lot. I'm a big movie guy.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, I pay 10 quid to watch a 2-hour movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for any game that's under 10 hours, for every 2 hours in length that it is, it's worth 10 quid to me. After you get past 10 hours, I think any game more than 10 hours is worth full price, regardless of how long it is. So I don't go for the pound an hour thing. I go for the, compared to movies, how much am I getting out of it? Okay, and therefore, once you get up to that kind of 50 quid, which would be like a 10-hour game, I would pay 50 quid for a 10-hour game, right? Mm-hmm. But once you get past 10 hours, I'll pay whatever the full price is for the game, if I can afford it at that price.
Curiously on that, because like I think it's quite interesting you both use time as a metric, because like time's really the only thing going in you can find out first. You can't find out if you're going to like the game or anything like that. You can use how long to beat, and generally there will be some kind of it's 30-40 hours. What would make you what would turn you off that would make you want to pick this up on a sale, or like through CD Keys sponsor us or something like that?
So for me, there's a couple of things. One is it comes back to time again of do I have time to play the game when it's first kind of releasing and available at full price. Okay. Yakuza Like a Dragon's a really good example. I bought that on a sale about 3 months after it initially released, but I did actually plan to buy it at full price originally. I just didn't have time to play it at the time. So time to play the game is a big thing for me, but also it does depend on how it reviews, because how something reviews won't necessarily affect whether I buy a game or not.
Yeah.
But it does affect what I'm willing to pay for that game if the time metric doesn't support. Do you know what I mean? So for example,
I guess how quickly you'll pick it up as well then.
Yeah, so for example, I can't think of a game right now.
I was going to say, Ratchet and Clank is one you're not particularly interested in. So
that
might be one you go
so
for
Ratchet is a game that I want to play, but it's not a game that I'm willing to... It's not enough of a game for me that I'm willing to pay full price for it. But I think part of that is my interest in Ratchet is more about, as a developer, I want to see what they're doing. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And that's why it makes it a little bit odd for me, because I play far more games now than I ever used to. But yeah, I think of a short game, so I think of something like Miles Morales, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's
that's
about what
you picked that up as well, didn't you, Jake?
I haven't played it yet still, but my partner has. So
sure.
So it's about 8 hours long, right?
Yeah.
So technically, in my time metric, that game should be worth about 40 quid to me. However,
I'd say, like, considering I've played it, and I think that is pretty fair.
Yeah.
Sort of price.
And this is the thing. It is a game that I would have bought at 40 to 50 quid. Obviously, it cost more than that.
It did. Yeah.
But the reason I was prepared to pay more was, one, because I needed something to play on the PS5. Two, I already had a connection with that series, and I think that does a lot. You know, there's a lot of subconscious things that affect whether you're willing to buy something at full price. You know, I'm a big fan of Shenmue, Luke. You know that,
of course.
And it's like they could make a Shenmue game which was worth the $5, and I would still pay £100 for it if that's what they were charging.
To be fair, I'm there as well with certain genres or certain games. So Resident Evil, the same, and even Dark Souls. If they was to turn around and say, hey, we decided, fuck it, we're making another Dark Souls game, it would be a case of, oh yeah, go ahead, take my money.
Yeah. Curious. Okay, quick tangent. What are your thoughts on Elden Ring, really quick? I don't think we've talked about that. Yeah, we haven't seen a lot, but is it a similar case for you? You're already in because it's it is from Soft.
I mean, I'm solidly in. Like I am because I mean, number one, it's coming from one of my favorite developers, and then they've also got a fucking crackhead genius behind it for for the storytelling side of it, or for the world building. Yeah. So for I mean, from the sounds of things, having George R.R. Martin in as well means it's going to be more of a story-driven experience as opposed to the other games, which are obviously more lore-based. If you're not interested in finding out the story, you don't have to. But because he's in it, that means there's definitely going to be a bit more of an actual cohesive story element behind it. Which means,
is
I mean,
nice.
they did that a bit with they did that a bit more with Sekiro as well. So they are kind of going in that direction a bit more.
Yeah, and
which
to
is
be
nice.
fair, Sekiro, I've still not completed Sekiro yet, but I mean, they were pulling it off as far as I'm concerned up to the point I got to. I was like very happy with that game. It is literally just my ability to play it that has stopped me from completing it. And again, that's another example of a game that I actually did pay full price for. Before it came out. So what you're saying about having like a dedication to a franchise, or in my case here,
or a developer or anything like that, for sure.
Yeah, it does definitely influence your choice to go, Joe, what? No, I'm going to support this, and I feel like that like a lot. So to compare it to music, right? I collect records, I collect vinyl. I only collect vinyl of albums that I think are really fucking good, that I think are really worth the money. And I'm not saying that the artists aren't worth making money for it, because if they don't make any money for their music, then we get nowhere. We get no more new music, and we get nothing good come out of it. But then every now and then something drops, like Idols dropped an album last year, and I didn't even. Well, I think I listened to like one song and I was like, I'm sold. I'm gonna go and get that album.
Sure. So
yeah, no, there's definitely an element of just, I'm not. I mean, I call myself a cheapskate and stingy, but I certainly have like a dedication to certain things where I'm more than willing to do it.
I mean, I'm the same. Like, we're both in relatively similar situations where we don't have a huge amount of money available to us. And that obviously is going to lead to us either, picking up, not so much now because, we can't go to like CEX and stuff like that as readily. But going for like pre-owned
I've got
games
one on my doorstep, mate.
Yeah, you do. You can literally step outside and you're in CEX.
Yeah, literally. I threw a DS.
That would be dangerous for me. Yeah, you could just open your window and be like, trade it.
I found an old DS. I know, tangent time, but I found an old DS and I was like, oh well. I mean, I've got a 3DS. I'm not. This thing's never going to be touched. So I was just like, whatever. Go sell it. I guess as well. Actually, this is probably where me always looking for bargains comes from. I come from the GameStop, like buy and sell and trade in side of gaming. So back, I didn't grow up with like large amounts of money or anything, but we'd buy games and then we'd sit down, we'd play them, and then we'd go and trade them in to get the next new game that we want. And all of it was just done by looking at the cases and being like, hey, that case 100%. Looks sick. I remember the first time.
There wasn't as much information available back then, right? So
true. So
a lot of it is just going off the guy behind the counter.
Thing
like,
is,
is this good?
I still kind of go by this. I try my best not to look at anything. So something I learnt last week from Luke was that the Resident Evil Village, because I've not played Resident Evil 7 yet, and I had no idea that they was. I know I keep jumping back to Resident Evil, but it's just a good example at the moment. I didn't know that Village was directly linked to Resident Evil 7. I didn't know that that was going to be a thing. So I actually do try to avoid a lot of information, especially on games that I think I probably will.
Do you
want to
find
play.
that's kind of negative sometimes though, where because you've avoided information about a certain game, either you've avoided some information that would make you interested about a game, or you've avoided some information that actually would put you off as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely worked in both ways. So like that last Assassin's Creed game that came out, right? So I've I've put my head down to not pay attention to anything Assassin's Creed for a long time because I just fell off of the franchise. It started going to areas of history that I had no real interest in, so I stopped paying attention altogether. And then all of a sudden you got what's it actually called?
Valhalla.
Yeah, Valhalla. It's because there's been like quite a lot of Norse-inspired games lately with all similar names. But yeah, I completely ignored its existence. Paid it no heed, and then like a year later is about a year later now, isn't it? I've started like just oddly seeing things about it and being like, oh, do you know what? Actually, I think I probably would enjoy that game, just based on the aesthetic of it and that. Which means I'm a year late to a party that I probably would have enjoyed. And I fully intend to pick it up at some point. But again, because of my skepticism over I just fell off with the games over the years. It's not something
that
I
makes
would look
sense.
at paying full price.
I think we've all done that, where it's like, for example, I think Cyberpunk, for example, will put people off of whatever CD Projekt Red does next to a certain degree.
Oh yeah, there'll definitely be those people that are like, no, they're terrible, I'm not touching it.
And it's like, it will be that thing where there will be those people who are put off, even if the game's great, even if the game is for them. Because it does happen. If something puts you off of a franchise or it puts you off of a developer, you then begin to ignore what that developer's doing until everybody shouts about it so much that you can't ignore it anymore. There you go. So I just wanted to add that in.
Didn't CD Projekt Red? They fucked up with The Witcher 3 to begin with as well, didn't they? Like the release for that was rocky
it was a bit
as hell.
Iffy. It was iffy at launch, but obviously nowhere near.
Nowhere near
levels.
But I think again, it was one of those games that I didn't really hear people like. I was just a fan of the Witcher series anyway, having played the previous ones. But I didn't really hear other people talking about it much until a lot of the issues with the initial release of The Witcher 3 had already gone away.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It felt like a game, with Witcher 3, it felt like a game that sort of started having more conversation around it like 6 months later, and then had loads of conversation around it once they brought out like the Game of the Year edition.
Yeah, 100%.
With the DLC
That's when I
and
dipped
stuff.
in. That's when I dipped in, because I saw a lot about it around launch and a lot of previews and stuff, and it looked really cool. But I knew nothing about the series. I hadn't played the other games, didn't know anything about the books. And it wasn't until I was working with someone who'd picked it up really cheap. He was like, dude, this is sick, you should pick it up.
Yeah.
And I think I got like the whole, with both DLCs for like 30 quid, I think it was. But actually speaking about that, what does, on the developer side, obviously as much as you can say, obviously paying full price means that the developer gets a good cutback. They get, a return on their hard work. How different is that when, obviously, it tends to be out of the hands of the developers when something gets discounted, but how much difference does it make when there is, 10%, 20% up, even like a 50% discount on the developer side?
All I'll say, I'll put it this way, is, I'll put it like this. The people at the bottom are the first people to lose out on money when something's going cheaper. So just think of it like that. And it's not only that, something that people really, I think, don't quite understand about when you buy a game on sale. Because I have no issue with it, as I've said. Personally, I have no issue. But there is there are business things that happen which actually are negative for the consumer if they buy a game on sale. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, if you release one game and they can see that you've sold X number of copies at full price, a publisher's going to give you more money for your next game based on the sales of that first game, right?
Sure.
If they can see that the game sells loads and has made money, but it's only selling at a certain price, that's going to change the scope of what you're allowed to do. It's going to change the money and resources available to you, which ultimately means that any follow-up game or, any next project from a studio potentially isn't as good because of a lack of resources. And that isn't the consumer's fault, but that is a negative on the consumer. And that negative in part comes around because the consumers have to buy games at prices that are affordable for them.
Yeah, 100%. I guess you can have the same conversation about when a game is either launched too early or, there's issues at launch. So then people, again, Cyberpunk, maybe not the best example because they're on like 13 million sales or something stupid like that.
Days Gone is probably one of the best examples.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I've got a bit of an older example, and it is something I actually did. Again, I paid full price for, and I think it's the last time I've actually jumped into a new franchise paying full price for a game, because this game stopped me from doing it, actually, which is Sea of Thieves, right?
Okay.
Sold under this pretense of, just being... I mean, it was a good game, and I've had a lot of fun playing that game over the years, and, again, the Rare put their fucking backs behind it and, kept pushing content for it and brought it up to a game that I think is worth the money I paid for it. But on launch, mate, I paid, I think it was like £65 for that game, something like that, as a pre-release thing, just so I could get a fucking day one patch, which is cool. I mean, my character still wears a day one patch, but
Nice.
yeah, that was an expensive game. And you start it up, right? And you probably spend your first like 5 to 10 hours being like, this game's sick. And then you realise that you've done the same 3 things
over and over again.
Which is fine, because ultimately it is just a repeat game. The main fun from that game comes in PvP, unless you are every other player in the game, because apparently none of the actual players of the game really enjoy PvP that much. But it literally the lack of content I got from that game, and it took them nearly 2 years to get that game to a point where I'm like, okay, that's worth the money.
So that is a game. This is one of those things where I think that something, on the industry side, something that I think would help understanding from consumers and actually would maybe help more consumers buy games at full price, is if they had launched Sea of Thieves and they had said, right, it's early access, but we're going to charge full price for it because this price will allow us to put more into development of the game and improve it over time.
Yeah, man.
I think that's something consumers would understand, and I do think that's something games do, but I think they're not upfront enough about that's why they're doing it, and
100%.
And therefore consumers don't necessarily understand what's happening.
But Baldur's Gate 3 is a really good example of something that is doing that. The minute it launched, they said, okay, look, this is going, as an early access game, we're still developing in it. And basically it was to get user feedback is the reason they've gone early access. And the development process for Baldur's Gate 3, they as far as I can tell anyway, because I'm kind of watching this game again, I don't want to get like too much information from it. I've not bought it yet. I'm definitely more than happy to pay full price for it. But I just by going onto the page, the first thing you see on the image for it on Steam is Druid class now playable. So you can literally, without even opening it up and going into it, you can see that they've done some more work.
Yeah.
You know, you can
Yeah.
see the direction they're going with it, and
I
it's
think,
like you say, transparency.
yeah, and I think that's the thing. But I think it's also, it's like I was saying before we were recording, that there needs to be some give from the consumer as well. Like, I do think the industry, you know, this is just me personally, I'm not speaking for anybody else in the industry, but I think that being a little bit more open about why you're making the choices you're making would be a good thing. But I think consumers then need to also be open to at least listening to that
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
for sure.
understand it, rather than just going, well, why don't you charge me less money and then charge me more later?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
we need to charge you the full price now so that we can invest that money. It's one of the things I've said to you before, Luke, over on our show, is about pre-orders.
Yes.
And about how I understand why consumers don't like pre-orders. A lot of consumers don't. But there is a massive positive from pre-orders. You know, I've heard, I'm not going to mention any specific games,
Sure.
but I've heard about games having budgets nearly double because of pre-order numbers. And it's things like that allow you your extra content, which makes the game better later.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
every single game, you know, it's one of those things where any game that gets a lot of content later on, if you think about it, is a game that either had massive pre-order numbers or sold a lot very quickly.
Yeah,
And it's because they reinvest that money. If people are if people are buying it on sale, that's fine. The company will still make money if they sell enough units, but they are less likely to reinvest that money in the game.
Yeah.
And
sure.
that's why buying at full price is something that in the long run benefits the consumer, but in the short term it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, I think the early access model is one that should be used a lot more, but it's a double-edged sword because, you know, you get your Baldur's Gate, your Hades, from my experience, who do it the right way, and there is a constant contact with the consumer, and there is that constant progression that you see. But there are also the other side of the coin who take advantage of that. I think is it Star Citizen that's been in early access for a million years by this point.
Yeah. And isn't that, like, I could be wrong, but I think that's the game that has kind of received the most crowdfunding ever as well.
I think so, yeah.
really?
So
I think so.
So, you know, take that as you will. I'm not going to comment on it, but you would assume that if you're receiving consumers' money to make the game,
Yeah,
you
should make the game.
you should be open with them about the process.
100%. And this is something we've talked about before, Jordan. I think we talked about it privately yesterday, actually. I really think communication is one of the biggest things that the gaming industry would benefit both sides from. I think the more realistically open you are with consumers and telling them what's going on with your game and stuff like that.
For sure, because let's be clear, you can't be 100% open.
No,
you just can't.
Yeah. No, of course not.
But yeah,
Awesome. I think, like I said, I think there are ways forward with early access. It is just so many people have taken advantage of this, like especially with like live service games and stuff like that. Early access is like perfect for that sort of stuff.
I think
especially if you're
this is-
rewarding like the people who adopt early. Like Jake said, he got a day one patch. It may only be small, but it is something.
I
you can
think
look back
that
and
this is where Game Pass will play in over time.
and that's exactly where I wanted to go next. I think.
I was going to say,
Obviously,
go on.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that I think that the major benefit of Game Pass that people don't necessarily see is a lot of these developers get a lump sum of money up front from Microsoft, and they then get bonuses based on how much the game is played.
Yeah.
But for a lot of these developers, especially the smaller ones, and they've got a lot of smaller ones on Game Pass that are actually genuinely great games, but for a lot of those developers, that money they get up front is helping them to make the game better.
Yeah.
And I do think, at time of recording, the game Second Extinction is releasing on Game Pass today, but it is in-game preview, and they're making it very clear that it's in-game preview, which is what they call their early access.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think we will see a lot more of that. I think because of Game Pass and because it gives you easy access to a huge amount of consumers, I think you will see games that use that service almost like an early access program.
Yeah.
But I think they just need to be a little bit more open about that is what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
And then I think people will understand it, you know?
I think the Game Pass stuff and all of that would actually stop me, and like honestly stop me from referring to CD keys for games. So
Yeah.
you know, I jump to CD keys whenever a game comes out that I'm like mildly interested in, but I don't know whether I'm going to like it or not. You know, I may have watched a review or two and been like, okay, that
When
looks
it's kind of a
alright.
bit of a risk, right? When
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
bit of a risk for you.
So,
Because
so
I've
then
been
I'm
there
like,
before.
Well, I don't want to pay full price for that. But then with things like Game Pass, especially with the amount that's going on there these days as well, you know, that it's a good alternative, and especially knowing that now as well, that you know Microsoft's actually just you know, they're not just having availability of the game and being like, you know, putting it out there. They're actually dumping a lump sum towards the developers and that. Yeah, well, it reminds me of a bit of back in the. I've not really been a console gamer since like the 360 era, but back on the 360, you used to have your homepage and you could scroll through it, and then you'd have like Xbox Arcade and the Xbox
Yeah,
indie
yeah.
games and that.
Yes.
I used to
yeah,
find
yeah.
so much gold going through all of that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
There-
was gutted when that went away.
And that's the one thing with Game Pass. I think you've said it, Luke, that the problem with Game Pass right now is that Microsoft might be the only ones who can do it the way they do it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
and
I
that's
do think that.
that's kind of the issue, is like, you know, I'm not going to speak about any specific games, but I've heard of games getting quite big sums of money to go on Game Pass.
yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
But the point is that, you know, it benefits the consumer because it's almost like Microsoft paying to secure something for the benefit of their consumer, right? But they are also making money by people signing up to the service. I think that I understand the concerns around Game Pass, as I've said before, and I understand that, you know, if it gets too big and too successful, they can kind of get to the point where, yeah, they could do whatever they want. They could charge you like 30 quid a month for it or whatever.
Yeah.
But if it gets that big and they've got that much on there, it
Kind of
might
worth
be
it.
worth that money.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because instead of it works out, you're paying just over £70, something like that. So you're paying for a game for a year and having
Yeah.
access to however many games on there. It could change to 2 or 3, but then that's still
For sure.
cheaper than actually, you know, going and buying those individual games.
I
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I wouldn't, you know, I know that you've said to me, Luke, I don't know if Jake still doesn't have Game Pass, but you said to me he hasn't signed up for a Game Pass yet.
No, I don't
have
have
you?
it. I'm so done, because like the thing is, I'm solidly sold on it, and I really think, like, you know, if you're into gaming and that, like, you should just sign up to Game Pass.
So that's what I wanted to ask you then, Jake.
Why haven't I?
Why don't you have it yet? What is the reason?
Do you know what? I mean, I've most of the games I'm playing at the moment, I already own.
Okay.
I've got a massive fucking backlog on my Steam library of stuff that I want to get through, and I find at the moment I don't have as much time as I would like to
Yeah,
sit
that
down and
makes
play
sense.
new games. So as it stands right now, because I've played 2 games this week, and I couldn't even think of a space of time to fit something else in. I don't have the time to even warrant, because how much is it at the moment? Like £9? I don't even
It
know.
depends what you pay for. So
Yeah,
if-
so for the
if you-
first month it's £1, and then it's £7.99 just for PC.
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
So obviously you don't
But
have
if
an
you
Xbox.
but if you
One
get
reason.
Ultimate, which allows you, I think that bundles in like all the EA stuff as well.
Yeah.
And it gives
Oh,
you
yeah,
access to
true.
the cloud gaming, which means you could, in theory, at some point play any console exclusive games
Yeah.
on your
Yeah,
PC.
you can do it through.
Oh, nice.
Because you've got an iPhone, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are just playing around with
So
some
Ultimate,
kind of Game Pass
so
there.
Ultimate, which is all inclusive, everything. I think that's $10.99 a month.
I
Yeah.
believe so, yeah.
But even at that price, talking about the value of it, I think Game Pass has got to the point where nobody actually argues that it's worth the money.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
It is whether it's worth the money to you, because do you have time to actually utilize
Yeah.
the service? I think is the bigger issue
So,
right now.
Yeah, I've looked through the catalogue. I did it whilst we was recording one of the episodes once, actually. And there's plenty on there that warrants me spending that money. Yeah, because it's stuff that I would either never play or have thought, I wouldn't mind playing that, but realistically know that I'm never actually going to buy the game itself. But,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it literally does for me just come down to a time constraint sort of thing.
Yeah.
When you factor in work and then all the other bits
So
that
do
you're
you
doing.
think that once you get through your backlog a bit more and kind of have less games that you want to catch up on, do you think you'll get to the point where you are a Game Pass subscriber?
I think so. To be honest, I don't really think that's going to be too far away.
No, I was gonna say maybe even after Resident Evil.
Yeah, so that's.
And I mean,
literally what I was
there
gonna
was
say.
talk of Microsoft trying to get Village on Game Pass, wasn't there?
Yes,
Shut
yeah.
the
So there
front door.
was some kind of talk that they were in talks with Capcom
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that, but then it sounds like maybe Sony made a deal.
Yeah.
So that they
it-
couldn't do
yeah.
that. But obviously I can't comment on that stuff because I don't know.
Yeah, no,
But
of course.
I'm
I mean,
actually
there was a thing that came out that that Sony thing where it said they couldn't put it on Game Pass, so it looks like it's very unlikely until like a year after, I think it was. Otherwise, that would have been a perfect time for you to jump in.
But no, I'm
getting that
actually
on
going to
Game
sing
Pass.
it from the opposite side of what you wanted me to talk about on this side. Like I support the development of these games so much because I love the franchise so much that actually I probably still would buy it
Buy the
outright.
game to support them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curiously, so I've only got 2 more points I want to touch on. But while we're on Game Pass, obviously there's only so much you can say, Jordan, both
Go on.
in, like legally, I guess, and
Yeah.
your actual knowledge. But how much is there a benefit to people playing something on Game Pass instead of buying it on PC or buying it on
Yes.
PlayStation?
There
that you know of?
definitely is. There definitely is. Because, as I said, a lot of these games have bonus structures based on people playing it, even if they play it for 1 minute.
Sure.
So, it is possible for developers to make far more money by you playing it from Game Pass rather than buying it outright.
Interesting.
Obviously, that doesn't always happen, and
No, of course.
and at the end of the day, they're still going to appreciate a permanent sale of their game.
Yeah.
But what I would say is the way that I use Game Pass as a consumer is if there's a game on there that I've really enjoyed, that I'm like, I want to give this developer a bit of extra support, I will then buy the game afterwards. Because the advantage of Game Pass is you get a discount on the game if you're a
Yep.
Game Pass subscriber.
Yep.
So you do save yourself a bit of money, but it's giving the developer direct support, and it does then mean that if that game ever comes off of Game Pass, you still have it available to you.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're able to do that, that's also a kind of alternative for you. So Jake said that he would still buy Resident Evil to support the developer,
Yeah.
but he could, in theory, if it was to go on Game Pass,
Yeah.
he could, in theory, play the game on Game Pass and then buy it using the discount
Yeah.
if he wanted to keep it
Yeah. I
I
permanent.
guess it's like a try before you buy sort of thing. And
100%.
like things like Game Pass and PS Now kind of just make sense these days anyway. Like we're very much in a like what's the right term for it? So
It's
like
a digital world.
Yeah, well, we're in a Netflix world, aren't we? Like so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have this massive catalogue of films available to us via like different companies such as Netflix.
Yeah.
We just peruse our way through it, and we pay a monthly subscription fee. And when we get bored of what's on there, we cancel it and just move on to the next one. Or at least that's the way I do it. I don't pay for them all at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it just makes sense that the gaming industry moves in the same direction as the film industry, because it is a source of entertainment, and if it's something that we're used to, it's already been tried and tested. They know
the
this
thing
model
is,
works.
the direction that they're going in, and this would be kind of my final point on Game Pass, is the direction they're going in is good for the business and it's good for the consumer. And I think
100%.
that's what people aren't quite understanding right now. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand why it's good for. Yeah. They understand why it's good for them, but they don't understand how the developers are still making the money.
100%. It feels like a lot of people are waiting for the but. They're waiting for the how is this going to screw me over or something like that.
Yeah,
does it mean that it's screwing over developers or what? But it for all intents and purposes, it sounds like, although it's not necessarily wholly profitable for Microsoft, they're big enough that doesn't really matter at the minute. It's working for the development side. It's working for consumers.
It's working for 2 out of the 3, right?
Yeah,
and once it gets big enough, it could work for all 3 parties.
Yeah, absolutely. So the final point I wanted to touch on, it kind of relates to Game Pass in a way, because Game Pass potentially relieves a part of the industry that I'm kind of curious about, that I want to ask you about really quick, Jordan, and that's refunds. Because Jake's refunded games in the past, I've refunded games in the past, obviously through Steam. PlayStation is terrible for that stuff. How much on the developer side do refunds hurt? Is that something that's taken up, if you buy through PlayStation, is that mostly PlayStation absorbing that, or does that feed and trickle down?
So it kind of depends, right? Because it depends on the circumstance of the developer. So, for example, if you're a third-party developer, PlayStation or Xbox or any platform have a certain cut that they take from the sale of the game on their platform. When a game is refunded, use your brains a little bit. If they take a certain cut, what does that mean about the refund? Who pays for that? Because who is responsible? And I think, I can't be. This is one of the things where I can't be absolutely black and white.
No, that's fine.
But I would just say read between the lines. And think back to what I said earlier about kind of the little guy being the first one to lose out on money. Sure. Yeah. And then think about who eats that cost.
100%. No, that's just one that popped into my head just now thinking about Game Pass, and when, as you just said, you referenced back to it, when something gets discounted, who that hurts more. I think that's been really interesting. I think that's I've got everything I wanted out of that discussion. Nice. Sorry if people wanted it to be a bit more headbutty, but I said before, I feel like we were going to meet on the middle on this.
I hope that I've been as open. I hope I've been open enough for people to learn something.
Yeah.
But I can't be fully open,
No, of course. No, I think it's been a really informative discussion. So just to end off real quick. Me and Jake, we did a Ubisoft 35-year thing the other week. And Jordan, you said you would have loved to have been a part of it, but obviously being a Ubisoft guy, there's only so much you could talk about.
For sure.
So I wanted to bring it back around. I wanted to ask you what your favourite Ubisoft game is in the 35-year history of, that Ubisoft.
Well, my favourite game would be hard to pin down in terms of individual game.
Okay.
But my favourite Ubisoft series as a gamer is far and away Splinter Cell. Let's be honest. Let's just be very clear. Like Splinter Cell is one of the best. If you look at Chaos Theory, a lot of people actually didn't play Chaos Theory, which is odd. But Chaos Theory is one of the highest rated games of all time.
Yeah.
It's
Is it still Ubi's highest rated game as well?
Currently it is. And it's one of those things where I think people sleep on Splinter Cell a little bit
Yeah.
Because over at UB, to bang the drum a little bit, I think we do a very consistent level of quality of game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is often at least good, I would
Yeah.
say. And I think people sleep on Splinter Cell because around the time when Splinter Cell was coming out a lot, you still had Metal Gear, you had Hitman,
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
similar other games.
I was definitely a Metal Gear over Splinter Cell. I never got into the Splinter Cell series. Not a
Oh, don't
single
get me
one of
wrong,
them.
I'm a huge Metal Gear fan as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me it would be Splinter Cell, and then outside of that, I would probably have to say Assassin's Creed, right? Because
Sure.
I mean, you
let's
can't
be
not.
honest, I think that anyone who thinks of Ubisoft thinks of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it is their flagship now.
But I also think, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe it's just because I work for the company, but I also think that, if you think about Assassin's Creed, it's one of the few franchises that has sort of become known outside of gaming as well. There are people
Yeah, I
who
mean, it got a
aren't
movie.
gamers. There are people who aren't gamers that know and understand what
Yeah,
Assassin's
yeah.
Creed is,
Yeah.
and there aren't many games that that's true for. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the fact it got a movie above so many other things. I mean, we're only just about to get an Uncharted movie and stuff like that.
For sure.
Speaks to how big Assassin's Creed is, and Ubisoft have had plenty of huge IPs like Prince of Persia, Far Cry. There's loads.
Prince of Persia
But
had a
Assassin's
film.
It did.
Yeah, that was
That was
trash.
all right. I didn't mind that too much.
I didn't like the Assassin's Creed film either. If we want to get there, but
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
I like the
That's a
Mortal
discussion for
Kombat
another
movie
day.
that came out recently.
The what ones are?
The Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. I don't even know.
Apparently,
how to watch
it's
it
not
over
as bad as I was expecting.
It's meant to be pretty good.
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
a lot of gaming people like it, and I think that's what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
needed to achieve.
Yeah. So, quick thoughts on the Mortal Kombat movie then, Jordan. Surely only one of us that's actually seen it.
What I love about the Mortal Kombat movie is they're not ashamed of the fact that it's a video game movie, but it's a video
Sure.
game movie
Good.
in a good way.
Yeah.
They've
Is it almost like it kind of is like the best parts of taking out all the cutscenes and smashing them together, sort of thing?
kind of. It's a thing like, they just appreciate the games. So for example, if I can spoil one scene, it's not a massive spoiler. But there's the leg sweep spamming, There's a scene where
Did they
where
actually
the guy,
do that?
yeah, and they do it in the movie.
That's great.
And it's like, what a way to pay respect to what you're doing and
Yeah.
understand your consumer base. And I think that
Yeah.
this is a movie where they've made a video game movie. They haven't tried to adapt a video game into
Yeah,
a
yeah,
movie.
Oh, that's good.
I think that's kind of like I quite like Detective Pikachu, and like Sonic was okay, but I think that's kind of where that's kind of what's missing is like video games are a bit stupid, and it feels like like the movies are far too serious.
I think
There's
that
too much.
I think the problem about video game movies is a lot of people making these movies either don't respect or don't understand what they're actually making.
Yeah.
And in the case of Mortal Kombat, it feels like every single person in this movie knew what they were making and they knew
Yeah.
what they needed to be.
Whoever made the old Street Fighter film definitely knew what he was doing as well, because that was quality. I still love that
Yeah.
film. I mean, it's absolute trash, but I'm a lover of trash, so
I mean, it's kind of like the Uncharted movie that we're going to be getting. I think it's the end of this year. It sounds exactly like that. It sounds like it was people that don't really understand the franchise, don't understand the games, don't understand gaming.
I think the problem a lot of the time is, instead of making it for the video game audience first,
Yeah.
they try and make these movies for the game audience second and for the mainstream audience first.
Yeah. And it just feels like a dumbed
which is
down
a madness to me,
retelling of
because
something.
you already know there's millions of people that
Yeah.
like that IP, so
Yeah, man.
you don't really need to sell
And
it to new people.
it's one of those things, like, that's the last point on Mortal Kombat, because I think it plays well into the value discussion we've been having today. But it's one of those things, I've watched the movie. if it releases in cinemas here, I will go and watch it in the cinema, even though I've already seen it.
Oh, fair.
How did you? Where do you watch it? Do we even know where we can watch it here?
So obviously, if you use a VPN,
Pirate Bay.
you can. If you use a VPN, you can obviously use HBO Max, but there's also other ways to get it, of course.
Pirate Bay. as Jay said.
And also, I think that for people who want to wait and pay some money and support the movie, it is eventually coming on Amazon Prime in terms of premiere,
okay.
and you can then pay money to watch it.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things. Is like, I like this movie so much that I don't think I've ever wanted a movie to get a sequel more than this one.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
And therefore, I will support it with money in whatever way that means. Even if it means buying a DVD that I'll never use, I will do that.
Fair.
To be fair,
because,
I think the film industry could do with a bit of a hand. Like, I'm a huge advocate for films. I'm not very good at watching them at home, but going to the cinema to watch new releases, big time.
I used to go to the cinema, when times were normal. I would go to the cinema twice a week. Because that's just who I was. Like,
I mean, I remember crossing paths so many times with you at the cinema.
Yeah.
Like, you'd be coming out of a movie, I'd be going in, like, hey, dude, what's up?
Yeah, we would. I mean, number one, it's an easy date night thing to do, but there's always something good coming out, and for my favourite genre of anything is horror, and there's something you can't achieve in your living room with a horror film that you can sat in
For
the
sure.
cinema.
Yeah. I think that's true of many films, to be fair.
Oh yeah. Big old blockbusters.
Outside of your more drama-focused films, maybe, but
There's nothing like going to like an Avengers opening night sort of thing.
So
I really miss those.
Yeah.
So just some interesting kind of money stats on Mortal Kombat from a quick search I've just done. So they spent $55 million on the movie. They currently have a box office, and I think this is quite impressive considering how limited the box office is right now. They currently have a box office of 51 million. So they're just under what they spent on the movie.
That's not even out like properly everywhere yet.
No, and that's what I mean. So with a limited box office, I think they've done really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And
that's nuts.
I think again, for movies, it's one of those things like Jake just said. I think the movie industry could do with a lot of support right now, because they are one of the industries in terms of our entertainment that has suffered the most.
Sure.
So when cinemas do open, or when you're able to buy a movie on a streaming service or on a premiere kind of service, I would recommend doing that if you can, because there's a lot of movies that might not get sequels otherwise, and some of them are very good.
Well, I worry most about actual cinemas dying, because you've already seen loads of cinemas shutting down. And I guess this is one way where like streaming services can become a bit of an issue. There was a thing with it on Disney with was it Mulan? I think it was the live action Mulan, wasn't it? They wanted to charge people on that, which it makes sense, but everyone was just like dead set against it. It's like, well, I already pay for your streaming service, why am I gonna give you money for it? But I mean, 100%. Disney isn't exactly a company that really needs the extra support, but
no,
I don't want to see every cinema shut down. I know a lot of Odeons
and that's kind of the thing, is if these movies don't make money in terms of, they've put a lot of movies recently straight to streaming and haven't charged people for it.
Yeah.
But they do have to somehow make money on these movies.
Yeah.
And if they don't make money on these movies, it will be the cinemas that suffer.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it will be the cinemas that close, and everything will just become streaming.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to come up with creative date nights, like...
Well, I mean... I don't know about you, Jake, but I like going to like the slightly older, smaller cinemas, because there's one where like near where my mum lives, and it feels like an old school cinema. It's got like neon lights and all the works.
I love the one at White Ladies Road. Actually, I don't know if you've been in there.
No, I haven't. Yeah. I can't remember what's that.
Yeah,
one
I
called?
always forget what it's
the Everyman cinema.
The Everyman, yeah. I haven't actually been in there, but apparently it's really nice.
Yeah.
But it is
nice.
going to be one like those that gets hit the worst. It's not going to be your like cinema deluxes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's going to be the nice.
The
little
big
ones
chains will be all right because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
The little ones are the first ones that will lose out.
I do wonder with this though if there will be like a full circle kind of thing, like we see in a lot of other things where it kind of ebbs and flows. So we get to a stage where cinemas are dying because of streaming, but then streaming gets so popular that like, why don't we open a building and then we can stream specific movies and charge people for that? Like, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it comes full circle
that is
again.
How dumb of a species we are, yeah. We're
already doing it with streaming. Streaming came about so we could like not have to pay stupid amounts of money for an entire package when we really want a specific thing. And now streaming's getting into doing packages again.
This might be absolutely crazy, but another way that they could do it in terms of movies is imagine that people just start making their own cinemas almost, right? Where they'll pay for a streaming service that these movies are on.
Yeah.
So say like HBO Max, because obviously they're releasing a lot of stuff to HBO Max straight away.
Oh, mate.
And
wait, pattern this idea before you say it.
And imagine if they do it, right? So they'll pay for a streaming service. They'll have one membership. They can use it on however many screens they want. And they will then charge each person £1 to watch the movie.
Yeah, just mental.
£1.
I need to get a bigger house and do this.
Like, people would do that, right?
You don't need to get a house. Look, with the amount of money you could potentially make from that. So there's a thing that happens. Right, obviously hasn't happened for a while now, but there's like this old church where they were playing old horror films there for a time, and like serial killer films, and you know they're old films that the person had already owned. They had a projector. And they were charging literally like £2 or £3 for like 30 people to come sit in there and watch a film. Yeah, you know, awesome.
But this is
sick.
This is my thing. I don't know the legalities of it, right? But technically, what is to stop a cinema just subscribing to a streaming service and then charging people money to come and watch the movies still?
Imagine doing like we've just had it with like WandaVision and Falcon and stuff like that, where you pay to keep coming back to watch the next episode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You pay to watch a series or something
because
like
this
that.
is the thing. How many people, right, instead of paying for a streaming service,
absolutely,
would go, oh yeah, I'll pay £1 every time, even though it's going to cost me more money in the long run.
Yeah.
I'd rather pay one individual £1 every time.
Because I mean, Netflix are cracking down on how many people are using your account.
Yeah.
So that could be like I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that's
something
that
have a shock when they get to my account. Jesus.
Because there is probably people already doing that. It's like, I'll sell you access to my account, and then because with Netflix, there's only so many people can use it at once.
Yeah. I just wonder
how many.
I just wonder whether, in terms of the business, I wonder whether that's something that the streaming services and the cinemas will eventually come to an agreement on, where it's like you can pay us a certain amount of money to have access to all of our content, and then you can charge people whatever you want for them to come and view the content.
Because although they don't directly need each other, there will be some correlation between cinemas going down and Netflix maybe not doing as well, because there's not as much money going into certain movies, so they got bolster their own stuff, sort of thing. So I could definitely see that happening.
Working together always benefits the consumer, and it benefits companies as well, and that's true of any industry. Movies, video games, TV. Like, a lot of the best TV shows are when two production companies work together on it, because they have more resources and they know different things and they can help each other be better at different things. So it's all about collaboration, I think.
Awesome. Absolutely. So just before we leave off, Jordan, I have one question I want to ask you, because I don't know if I've ever asked you this.
Go on.
We'll take Splinter Cell out of it, because I know you're a big fan of Splinter Cell, but what, out of an IP that already exists, what would be a dream game for you to work on?
Ooh.
That's a good question, actually.
Would
it have been Splinter Cell? Would that have been your IP, but I've taken it away from you?
No.
Okay, interesting.
So it depends. Are we talking strictly video game IP? or are we talking any IP that
No,
exists
you
in
go
the
wherever
world?
you want with it, dude. You go wherever you want with that.
I'll give you two answers then.
Okay.
As a video game IP, if I somehow one day have control over Shenmue and I can actually sort it out and deliver
Finish the story.
what people want,
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to do that.
Okay, sick.
But then in terms of something outside of games that I'd love to work on, I've said this to you before, Luke, it would be something like Daredevil, right? If I could make a Daredevil,
Yeah.
if I could make a Daredevil video game,
Yeah, that'd be dope.
because I think there's a very good Daredevil video game that you can
Yeah.
make,
I
and
really
I'm
think
surprised
you could do,
nobody's
like-
done it yet.
You could do literally like Batman Arkham levels with Daredevil.
There's a good story to tell with Daredevil as well. I feel like I know that
That's why Daredevil worked on. That's why Daredevil worked on Netflix, but doesn't work in movies because you have more time to
potentially.
tell the story.
I still didn't like fall into the TV series or the Netflix series so much, but I didn't think it was bad at all. But yeah,
I mean, it was certainly better than the movie.
yeah. I mean,
It definitely was.
doesn't take too much, but no, definitely, man. Daredevil, we could do with more of his existence.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. Well, thank you for joining us today, Jordan.
It's all right. I've enjoyed it.
I'm glad you have. Because I know you're a little bit nervous before because you weren't quite sure how we were going to approach it. But like I said, nice chill. We can't go to the pub and chat, so we do it here instead.
As I said, I just hope that I've been open enough for people to learn something.
For sure.
Without sounding like I'm kind of preaching to people as well.
It's been informative.
Yeah.
I personally have maybe not learned, but it's a bit easier to see like how some of the effects. So refunds is an example that we'll touch on very briefly. The whole actually think about it. What happens when you refund something? That does.
And
make
you know what
think.
the funny thing is? That would be where I would leave it off. I actually think that a lot of miscommunication happens between consumer and the industry, and I think sometimes that's because the industry isn't open enough, and sometimes it's because the consumer doesn't actually take time to think about what their actions mean.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%.
So hopefully one day we can get to this nice middle ground like we've had today on the show.
Yes.
Where we can just have informative discussions and help each other be better at things.
Absolutely. This is very unlikely to be the last time Jordan will be on here. We want to do a proper crossover at some point. I want to host some kind of game show between the two channels or something like that at some point. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun for sure.
But yeah, we'll leave it there for now. Again, thank you for coming on, Jordan. Where can people find you?
Well, I would just send them over to our channel at Game4_all on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Game4all on YouTube. We're also on Spotify. That's where you'll see me most if you want to, having these game discussions. I am on Twitter at Wheelie_average. But I don't really say much there, so probably best to just follow Game4all.
I don't think I've ever said this, but I love your handle.
Yeah, I
love a good
was
pun.
going to say that.
I think it's a clever one. I like that. But yeah, thank you, Jake, joining me again as always. We'll be back next week. I think next week we're gonna have the music discussion because Jake is
I'm proper looking forward to that actually.
So we're gonna get into why music's important in video games, our favorite either bits of music or game soundtracks.
Why do you like to copy us, Luke? We're going to be doing music soon over on the Game4all show.
Wait, are we? I didn't even know
we
that.
are. We are.
Oh, I know it's something we've talked about for ages, but we haven't actually got there yet.
Yes, I'm planning something very special, and we may have a guest on soon. So
sick. Well, there you go. You can get two different sides of it then. You can get the Eat Sleep Game side, and then you can get the Game4all side. Which would just be more of me because I'm over there as well.
Yeah, if you go for the Eat Sleep Game side, you're just going to have me waffling for ages about like the most minute sound.
That's fine. That's what people come here for.
We're going to be talking about Dead Space.
Oh, yeah. I love Dead Space. That's all good with me. If you've loved listening to this or liked listening to this, maybe love's a bit too strong, do give us a like. Do leave us some nice comments. do hit that subscribe button for us. It helps. And we will see you next week. Thank you once again for joining us. Goodbye.
Yeah, I normally like to say an awkward goodbye, but today I'm just going to say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.